So we're gonna let this sit for a couple weeks, but today, as every day,
We are Mike and Jeannie, and we restore old houses. In 2021, we moved to South Carolina and bought a 120-year-old Victorian house. Follow along as we put the polish back on this Victorian masterpiece.
welcome back to 1834 Restoration House.
It's a beautiful day here in South Carolina, and thanks for stopping by our channel. We're taking a whole different direction starting now. We've done all these other projects and those are done. So today we start working on our new HVAC system for the upstairs.
Yes, looking forward to that one. Today's program is sponsored by the generous support of our patrons. Your support helps to further our historic preservation efforts. For more information, visit patreon.com/1834 Restoration House.
Our house was built during the Victorian era, and we're thinking it was about 1890 or somewhere in there. And for some reason, the house never really had a heating system installed. So all of those years, the house was heated with coal-burning fireplaces. We actually have 7 of them. And then somewhere along in the 20th century, it might even been the 21st century, we're not exactly sure, but this system was put in. And we're not sure if this is the first HVAC that was ever put in, or maybe it was a replacement. We're not really sure. But what we do know is this enormous package unit right here heats the downstairs of the house, but not the upstairs of the house. There is no ducting up there whatsoever. That's fine, but what about the summer? The heat up there is unbearable, which makes the whole second floor of the house unusable. In the winter, particularly the dead of winter, even in South Carolina, it gets cold enough to be unbearable. And if we want to use the upstairs, we have to use space heaters, and that's kind of inconvenient and somewhat expensive. So we decided it's time the old Victorian gets some heat on the second floor. All of the old houses that we've restored over the years have had extensive heating and cooling work done to them. We had a couple of 1950s houses that we did. Those houses both received brand new HVAC systems. One of the houses didn't even have one to begin with, and so we put a whole new system in there. The other house had one, but it was so old it was literally falling apart, so we yanked it all out, put a new one in there. The original 1834 house, which this channel was founded on, it was this big old brick Second Empire mansion, and it had a full boiler system in it. And we did some extensive work to that one to make it work much better. New pumps and a couple of the things that we did. But this house here is kind of different because it does have an HVAC system already in place, and it works, sort of. I did some research last night to try to figure out what kind of a system this house needs. And I came up with 5 different options. Option number 1 is an 80% efficient furnace with no air conditioning. Option number 2 is an 80% furnace with air conditioning. 3 is a 92% efficient furnace with no air conditioning and also possibly with air conditioning. And then option number 5 is a heat pump. Now, heat pumps are interesting because all they are is an air conditioning system that works in reverse. So in the summertime, it cools the house. In the wintertime, it heats the house. And it does that by extracting the hot air from the cold air, if you can believe that, and putting it into the house. I know, it sounds crazy, but it does work. So those are the 5 options that we're looking at. You probably noticed that we haven't been doing a lot of restoration on the house itself lately, and that's because historically we've had 2 sources of revenue. That was our income from work and YouTube advertising revenue that we share with YouTube. Ever since I lost my job a couple of years back and had to take other work, that money that we used to use for that is pretty much gone. And so we've had to rely on YouTube revenue to fund any projects that we do around here. But because we haven't been doing a lot of that, the YouTube metrics have gone down, which means that our YouTube revenue has gone down. And so we're kind of in a point where we don't really have a lot to work with anymore. And so that brings us to this point of trying to figure out how to squeeze out an HVAC system with what little resources we have to work with. I priced out all of the systems just to see what we're looking at in terms of money to do these. And what I found was that the more elaborate options are off the table. We just simply can't afford to do them. The heat pump, as much as I'd love to do that because it would provide heating and cooling, is simply not possible. Now, they do have rebate programs that can pay for the cost of those upgrades, but the state of South Carolina doesn't support that, and so there's really no benefit to us to do that. Which leaves us with really two viable options, neither of which involve cooling. And that is an 80% furnace or a 92% furnace. We just simply can't afford to put the cooling component in at this time. But what we can do is put the right stuff in now to make it to where we can add it back in later. But the 80% furnace and the 92% furnace have some issues that I want to talk about real quick. The main difference between an 80% furnace and a 92% furnace is in the combustion. So the 80% furnace is pretty much the conventional method where the air passes over a set of coils, picks up the heat, and then it goes on out the exhaust. Now the exhaust that goes out is fairly hot, and it has to go through a piece of what they call B vent, and that is a metal pipe that goes up all the way through the roof of the house and out the top. The high efficiency furnaces, they actually have an extra heat exchanger. So that heat gets extracted twice out of the airstream. And so it pulls most of the heat out, which is great. That's where you pick up the higher efficiency. And the exhaust that goes out is no longer hot, which means that you can send it up through a plastic pipe instead of a metal pipe, which is cheaper. And also you can send that plastic pipe out the sidewall of the house instead of having to go through the roof, which is great. And I'll show you that in just a moment. So the high efficiency furnaces are more expensive, but they do give you more installation options. So let's take a look at a couple things real quick. The furnace will install right below that chimney in the attic space. And that's great because everything is nice and close to where it needs to be. But the problem is with the 80% furnace, the B vent pipe has to go right up through the roof. And that means doing a roof penetration. And it's so high up there and so steep that there's just no way that I can get up there and do the work, which means we'd have to hire somebody to come in with their equipment and install the pipe for us. Now the other option with the high efficiency furnace is that we can run the plastic pipe out the side. So if I put that pipe right above the window there, then that would be much easier to install because I can do that with a ladder. And then I can build some decorative woodwork to cover it up and conceal it. We're at the upstairs landing right now. Several episodes back, actually probably several months back, we talked about the possibility of adding an attic stairway. And we looked at all the different wall surfaces here, and we tried to figure out if a stairway could be built. Now, the fact that we have 10-foot high ceilings in this house means that a stair has to have a much longer run. It has the same rise, but it has to have a much longer run to get the rise that you need. And we just determined that because of the placement of the doors, there's no way that you can build a standard set of stairs up here that meets code. Well, how do we get to the attic then? The only way into the attic is through this room right here, which is kind of a spare room that we're using for storage, hence the big flowers here in front of me and the boxes. So in order to get a furnace up into the attic, that means the hole had to be enlarged. And the problem with that is you can't just cut the hole bigger because there's not enough support there, and there was a big joist in the way. I had to cut that joist out and then reframe that whole opening with new lumber. And we used rough cut lumber, which is exactly identical to what the original house was built with. Off camera, I went ahead and cut that hole open to enlarge it, and then I built a whole new door and reframed it and made it look really nice. So let's take a look and see how it turned out. Well, here it is, the final result. Now these bead boards here, these are brand new. I went ahead and cut those down in the wood shop, and I reproduced all of the tongues and grooves, all of the beads, and made it to be as close to being identical as the original as possible. And it's even the same species. Now, this is brown because we painted it. This is kind of an orange yellow color because I shellacked it. All of the woodwork in this house has been shellacked, but the woodwork in this house is very old, and so the shellac over time takes on a darker and darker character. This wood over the next 20, 30 years will eventually darken down and start to look more like its peers. And not quite so new. But anyway, I think it turned out all right. Everything fits pretty well. And now I can reach up and open this and set it aside. So now we have full attic access. But more importantly, we have enlarged attic access, which is big enough to pull a furnace up inside there. We're downstairs in my woodworking shop. And man, does it look like a bomb went off in here. Well, we had a lot of projects going on. Between the blanket chest for Jeannie, we had some amplifier cases, we had the attic access door, and I think there were a few other projects that I'm forgetting about offhand, but it has just made a mess of this shop, and frankly, I can't work when it's this messy, so this place is going to have to get cleaned up, but I'm not going to bore you guys with all of that. Let's go into the kitchen, and I'd like to show you a project that we've been working on in there.
With Mike working so much on the attic door and the furnace details, I have had a little more time to experiment in the kitchen. I'm trying sauerkraut. I've never made it, but we're trying it because we heard homemade tastes so much better than the stuff in the store, which kind of tends to have more vinegar flavor. So today is actually day 3. I need to mash it down. I would love to hear stories of yours, goods and bads. How did it turn out? And do you want to know how we're making it? Is there interest? Because we can always do a future video with this. Mash it all down. Now the first day, it smelled like cabbage. Second day, it smelled more like coleslaw. And today, it's definitely smelling more fermented, which is great. It's working good. There's lots of bubbles. I'm very happy. And since I'm using glass, I can use a dry erase marker. Day 3. So I have it on there. I don't lose track.
This room is looking a whole lot better. I still have a bit of work to do. But last night we were talking about the difficulty of filming in this room. One of the problems is if I'm over here working, you're looking at the back of the machine and you can't really see what I'm doing very well. And it's hard to position everything so that you can see it. So as part of this cleanup, we're going to go ahead and move some things around. So we're going to swap sides. We'll put the jointer over there. We'll bring the table saw and the planer over on this side here. And that'll change the workflow slightly, but it'll make it a lot easier to film. Before I get to work, I want to show you something. A company called Inkerma reached out to me several months ago, and they wanted to send me this unit to try out and share it with you guys. So what it is, it's a laser level, and it has all kinds of features on it, and I really have no idea what it does yet because I haven't read the book. And I don't have time to cover it this week, but in our next episode, I plan to unbox this thing and we'll check it out together and see how it works. Well, that's all we have for today. I'm really looking forward to starting that HVAC project.
Me too. It'll be so nice to be able to use that space again.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you for watching 1834 Restoration House.